As I say, life got in the way. It wasn't for any reason but to entertain people. And I used to carry a book of an encyclopedia of actors and comedians, and I used to carry it around and do little performances at dinners and stuff like that for the family. Unfortunately, at the age of 5, life took over. A very sensitive person. I'm a very creative person. I'm prone to addiction, I'm prone to anxiety, and I'm prone to depression. So my parents were very happy, everything was cool, and then all of a sudden they were separating, and it was a big surprise to me, and I couldn't make sense of it. And unfortunately, when I was 24, she took her own life.
Danny Thomas is an actor and musician whose mom was a writer and his father a filmmaker. He was born in Birmingham in the United Kingdom and raised in Australia. As a teenager, he was featured in the AFI award-winning film The Hillman, directed by his father. After the loss of his mother, Danny left the corporate world to tour the UK as a rock drummer. In 2014, he relocated to Hamburg, where he has a son. He trained in acting and has since featured in commercials, TV, and film. Danny is here today to share his story with us. He'll be talking about his inspiring journey through life, surviving loss, and his path towards recovery and healing. So Danny, thank you for being here on the show today.
It's my pleasure.
Your parents are Australian and you were born in Birmingham. How did that happen? Were they on holiday or?
Actually, they're both British, and they had some time in Jamaica.
Okay.
And then when they got back to the UK, they realised it was a pretty grey life after being in Jamaica. So then they decided to migrate to Australia when I was 2.
Right.
So I don't have any memory of Britain, but I remember arriving in Australia. That's my earliest memory.
So how was your childhood like?
So, yeah, my journey from childhood was, it was very free when I got to Australia when I was very young, and there was characteristics in me that were very clear at that time. I wanted to perform, I was quite an outgoing kid. I knew I wanted to act very young.
When did you know that?
I knew that at around 5.
At 5?
Wow.
Wow.
I used to wear a bow tie to school for the class photo, and it wasn't for any reason but to entertain people. And I used to carry a book of an encyclopedia of actors and comedians, and I used to carry it around and do little performances at dinners and stuff like that for the family. Unfortunately, at the age of 5, life took over, and I didn't get back to my creative journey at its fullest until I was 27. So,
there was kind of a break.
Well, as I say, life got in the way. I'm a very sensitive person. I'm a very creative person. I'm prone to addiction. I'm prone to anxiety, and I'm prone to depression. Now, these sound like heavy topics, but I've learned how to manage these things. But I think when you get a person like myself with these characteristics, you throw in some childhood trauma, it's going to be a wild ride. Yeah. And in my case, from 5 to 27, it was a very wild ride, so to speak.
Do you want to talk about?
Absolutely fine. So the first what I'd consider trauma was family parental divorce, and that happened at 5.
Oh, that can be quite tough, yeah.
Yeah, and it came out of left field. So my parents were very happy, everything was cool, and then all of a sudden they were separating, and it was a big surprise to me, and I couldn't make sense of it.
Yeah.
So my response to not being able to make sense of it was to blame myself as a kid. I think that's what kids do. So I felt responsible for them going separate ways.
Yeah.
And my father went on in Australia to have quite a successful life as a filmmaker, and just went about business. But my mother struggled with her health continually. And as single parents, I was sort of week on, week off.
So did you see both of them?
I did, but it was it was they were wonderful, loving parents. It was just very unstable in terms of a week with one and then a week with the other.
Right, okay, that was the arrangement.
Yeah, so by the time I was 12, I'd moved 28 times.
Wow.
So in terms of, it wasn't good for stability.
I mean, for a 5-year-old or, that tender age, it must have been quite tough for you.
Yeah, and as I say, I didn't worry about my father, but I worried about my mother because she was continuously battling health issues of various sorts. And
Were you close to your mom?
yeah, really close.
Closer to her than your dad?
I wouldn't know, but both
Okay.
equally. But I put aside my kind of childhood freedom because I was so consumed with worry about my mother. So
Yeah.
I kind of struggled to be this free, happy child because I was continuously just worried about the next thing going on with my mum. Anyway, to skip further ahead, as I got older and started to get busier with life as a teenager, I couldn't care for her so much. I was developing, my own life naturally. And I realized a lot of her issues were her own demons, and these were manifesting into health. There's no doubt that she had a number of, she had a bone.
So it was like psychological problems, so to speak, which were manifesting into like health issues?
Yes, she did have solid health issues. She had a bone disease and things like that. This was debilitating for her in a physical sense, but her biggest battle was against her demons. And unfortunately, when I was 24, she took her own life. So this is the second big trauma that I consider in terms of my journey.
A terrible tragedy.
Mm.
How did you get through that?
Well, when she took her own life, it was again similar to what happened when I was 5. I blamed myself. Unnecessarily, I now absolutely realize that there is nothing I could have done. But because I had been caring for her and trying to make sure she was okay from 5 to 24, when she made that fateful decision, I was like, I should have been there, I should have changed it, I should have made her happy. It was prone to blaming myself anyway, so I took it.
That's a terrible burden to carry for a child.
It is, and for a 20.
So, I mean, you said you were taking care of her. In what sense? I mean, what can a child possibly do for?
It's not a child's responsibility
No,
to take care of the
absolutely
parent.
not.
And she was a wonderful mother. She did the best she could given her circumstances.
Yeah.
But given her health struggles and her battle with depression, she wasn't equipped at times to be. So my worry for her was more about me trying to make sure she was okay. And she would often tell me scary news week in, week out, like I'm going for a test and I'm not sure what it's going to be, and then I would worry about that and then it would be okay.
Yeah.
So the issue for me was by the time I was 24, I was very desensitized from her medical condition. I'd heard it so much that I was kind of closing myself off.
Yeah.
So when she committed suicide, my response was, well, I distanced myself. I wasn't there enough. And I felt bad for distancing myself. But the reason I had distanced myself was because I couldn't take it anymore. So
how long did this guilt go for, and did you get any sort of help?
I got help, but it took, my initial response was to make myself as busy as possible to avoid dealing with it.
Yeah.
So I was busy anyway. I was living a full life, creatively, many hobbies, things like that. I joined bands when I was 18 and I was in my first rock band. And so after her death, I threw myself into playing shows, studying, working, and partying to the extreme.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was just keeping myself relentlessly busy so that I didn't have to face up.
Trying to drown the pain, so to speak.
Trying to just fade it out. And I didn't realize at the time, I was I obviously wanted to succeed in everything I was trying to do. That was music and studying architecture and working at the same time. But the excessive stuff and the depression and anxiety was manifesting of me just pushing myself too far and not taking the time to work through this stuff. So I joined my first band when I was 18, and for me that was amazing because engaging with audiences, and I just was on the drums, and all of a sudden as a shy, sensitive kid who'd been worried for his mother, to then be engaging with audiences and punk rock was very freeing for me. So I got into that kind of rock and roll lifestyle.
Did that help?
It helped and it hindered.
Okay.
It helped and it hindered. But actually what happened, so by the time I was 27, my second band in Melbourne that I had made was getting a lot of good shows and stuff in Melbourne, but we realised that if we stayed in Melbourne, we were going to stay at a certain level. So the three of us decided just on the dance floor at a nightclub one night to leave everything and move to the UK and be full-time.
You did?
Yeah, and this is an amazing moment because we'd done a show and we were on the dance floor in a jazz bar in Melbourne. And the three of us were like, we can see where this is going to go in Melbourne. We've all been in bands and things like that. And the three of us just said, how about we go to London, leave our jobs, our families, all our opportunities in Australia. How about the three of us move to London and be full-time musicians?
Yeah.
And we all just went, okay. And then within 3 months, we were on the plane. The issue for me was I thought I was going to London to be in the biggest band in the world. I thought I was going to be a rock star, and actually the time in London was more about me confronting the stuff that I needed to face up to.
Right. So how was life as a drummer? How was life in the band and doing all the rock and roll live?
Because I'd been in a very corporate world prior to that, I'd been working in architecture. Architecture was cool, but the corporate side of it, being, at a desk 40 hours a week, and the pressure that comes with, architecture jobs and creativity and business was not great for me, the office environment. I don't have so much of an issue with the architecture, it was the corporate side of things that I struggled with. And it wasn't helping my anxiety. But a lot of that was because my well-being was being pushed to the limit because I was being very excessive with alcohol, I was being excessive with drugs, I was playing these shows, and I was leaving nothing for myself.
So when was the moment of transformation for you? When did it snap? When did you realise that you...
I realised in London, so after 2 years of doing shows, living a kind of rock and roll life, living day to day with not a lot of money, but actually playing around the UK, it was, for a moment there, it was actually living the dream because we had management and we were doing shows in different cities that weren't costing us money, but we weren't making money. But to me, it was living the dream for a moment because I was doing what I loved. I'd freed myself from this corporate world. I was having this amazing experience playing these shows. But I was feeling I was completely lost. I was completely lost within myself, and it was manifesting itself.
When you say lost, what do you mean?
I was lost in terms of I had these repeat behaviours that were self-destructive.
Okay.
And I couldn't figure out why. And I kept repeating them and repeating them and repeating them. And in the end of this time in London, I think I subconsciously knew that I had to face up to, one, forgiving myself, letting go of this guilt, going back to the guilt, letting go of this guilt and responsibility that I was carrying, and two, forgive my mother for her choice. The first thing I did was I actually refused. If you had met me back then when I was 27, I couldn't say the word suicide. So when somebody asked me, oh, your mum, and I'd say, oh, she passed away. And sometimes they'd say, how? And I'd say, oh, she had a bone disease, which she did.
She did, yeah.
I could not bring myself
So she
to
committed
say
suicide.
she committed
Yeah.
suicide.
So the pain was still there, and the denial was still there, and the guilt and all of that. When did you get out of it? When did you start?
The first step I took was getting this tattoo, actually. And this is her initials. It's just there. I think I did this subconsciously. I just said, I'm going to go and get her initials on my wrist.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that when you get a tattoo like that in a prominent spot, every time you shake somebody's hand,
They see it.
they're going to see it, and they're often going to ask about it.
Yeah.
And this happened pretty quickly. So I was at a party and a woman asked me about the tattoo, and she said, what's that? And I said, oh, it's my mother's initials. And she said, oh, you're a mummy's boy. Oh. And I realized, I was like, well, I don't know this person. I actually don't want to lay this heavy information on them, but I also need to talk about this. So obviously it was case to case. I wouldn't say this to everybody, but I knew that I needed to get comfortable with talking about her death. And it was so hard for me to just say it. And actually when I started to say it to close people around me, it was very freeing because I realized that people empathized and people could take it as well. I was worried about how they would feel when I said it.
Why were you worried about that?
It's my nature. I intuit other people, and I don't want to burden people and stuff like that. So I was often more worried for laying this heavy stuff on them that they didn't need to know.
Okay.
But I realized that I needed to talk. And then also when I was playing every night these shows, as a drummer, you're hitting your hi-hat all the time. And some of these shows I was sweating and I physically was not going to get through.
We have a picture of that.
Yeah, this is, I used to sweat profusely after, that sweat, that's not water, that's from a half an hour set. But when I was struggling sometimes and I didn't think I was going to get through a song and I was doing this on the hi-hats, I would look at the tattoo and I would get a boost. And it would get me through the show. It's just a tattoo, but the meaning behind it and my mother being there gave me a boost. And also just having it on my wrist got me talking. It just got me talking and talking and talking. And that's why now I can sit here on a talk show with you and to our audience. I'm not so comfortable talking about myself, but I know now that I'm kind of at the halfway point of life, hopefully, that my story can help others, especially those who have experienced loss through suicide.
I think it's very brave of you to reach that point where you can talk about your story and share this inspiring story with the rest of the world. So if there is anyone going through the same situation out there, what would you like to say to that person or to people going through the same situation that you went
There's
through?
a lot of consistencies, I think, with suicide, and the main thing I would say is do not blame yourself. People make their choices, and we all have the power within us to address the stuff we need to. So I would say, the worst you can do is blame yourself. There's also a lot of anger associated with suicide.
Did you experience anger?
I experienced a hell of a lot of anger, and now having a son.
Why was that?
Because of the choice.
Okay.
Because of the choice. By my mother taking her own life.
Who were you angry with? Your mom?
I was angry with her for making that choice. But that anger has subsided now because she was a wonderful mother, and I can now empathize with the battle that she couldn't overcome because I have this within me as well.
And you moved to Hamburg had a son, or you had a son before you moved to Hamburg?
When the band experience finished, unfortunately, when that came to an end, my ex-partner was from Hamburg.
Okay.
And we went back to Australia, and my son came unexpectedly in Australia. So this is kind of the next.
He was born in Australia.
No, he was conceived in Australia. But it was interesting because at that stage of life, I was very clear about my next chapter. I was very much about pursuing the acting Now that the band stuff had finished, I was really returning to my childhood dream, and I landed my first audition in a short film, and that was a huge step for me. And I remember sitting in this cafe with the script, and I just landed this film, and I was really happy for the first time, like very content and happy for the first time in terms of where things were going.
In Hamburg?
This is back in Melbourne.
Okay.
Yeah. But I also knew that our relationship had struggles, and I wasn't confident in our relationship. So I had this script, and I literally went home from the cafe, and that's when I found out my son was coming. So it seems like life sometimes, just when you think I'm here, I'm where I want to be, then it gives you another curveball.
Absolutely.
And it's uncanny when it happens. It's
Yeah.
like I could have at least had a week, just to bask in, okay, here I am. But it was pretty much on that day.
Yeah.
Here's your next thing. And the challenge for me was I wasn't sure whether I was coming back to Europe, and I wasn't sure about the relationship. So again, I had to make a very clear choice. And I made the clear choice to be a present father no matter what. And this is the choice that I'm most proud of. So I returned to Hamburg. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't work out, but I now have an amazing, wonderful new relationship and a fantastic partnership with my ex.
Yeah, so do you think your son has played a major role in your transformation?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm a wonderful father, and when he came, I was not ready to be a father. It wasn't part of my plan. Making the choice to be present and leave Australia again after I had returned and be a present father and be fully in his life in Germany has done nothing but reward and ground me, and the things that he reflects back to me is just, he's my proudest achievement.
Children do that, don't they?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot of cliche stuff, but when I came back to Hamburg, I realized I needed to be proud of my choices, and I'm really proud of my choices. So I wouldn't say I've had a journey of success in terms of like black and white career success.
What is success? If you have to define success, what would you say success is? There are so many different definitions for success. So
I think success and failure are one and the same. It's how you respond to them. They show you different things, and if you treat them as lessons and what you take from them, they're ultimately, they teach you different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, my success is actually self-development and confronting coming to a place now where I have a high sense of self-awareness where I can now help others. This is what I define as success, and actually just getting through it, because when you're dealing with parental loss and you're prone to a number of, anxiety and depression, it's a wild ride, as I said. So to be able to go through the self-awareness process and the self-work and take my stuff on to now be at a point where I know the things I love to do and to be a wonderful parent and partner to my girlfriend. This to me is success.
Yeah. Danny, thank you for being here on the show. That was a very inspiring story. I didn't know that you've been through something that terrible, and I think it's very brave of you to be able to sit here and share your story with the rest of the world, that you have come that far. I mean, there are lots of people who haven't reached this stage that you have reached. So I can only see positive things. I can only see it getting better for you. You spoke about success. I mean, success, this is success. I mean, this is it. It can only expand from here. It can only get better. And I wish you all the best. And I look forward to seeing you in the next show, the next episode. Maybe you can tell us more about more success stories, and I think that will be very interesting to hear about how things develop from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we've come to the end of the show. Don't forget to tune in for more episodes. Thank you for watching and see you next time.